I used your inheritance to invest in Jake's business, my stepfather announced casually over dinner, as if he was merely commenting on the weather. You don't need it anyway, you have a good job. My mother nodded in agreement, avoiding my eyes as she pushed food around her plate. I'm Olivia, 29, and this wasn't the first time Frank, my stepfather of 7 years, had made decisions about my life without consulting me. But this time, he'd gone too far. The inheritance from my grandmother was supposed to be untouchable, held in a trust until my 30th birthday next month. How exactly did you access that money, Frank? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. The trust wasn't supposed to be accessible until next month. He waved his hand dismissively. I have my ways. Besides, Jake's business venture needs immediate funding. It's a fantastic opportunity. We're talking millions in potential profit. Jake, my 25-year-old stepbrother, hadn't held a job for more than 3 months since dropping out of college. Mom? I turned to her, hoping for some support. She just shrugged, that familiar apologetic look on her face. Honey, Jake needs this chance. You're doing so well with your accounting career. You understand business decisions, right? Business decisions. I almost laughed. As a forensic accountant, I understood more than they realized. Instead of arguing, I simply nodded and continued eating. How much did you invest? All of it, Frank said proudly. $500,000. Jake's business plan is solid. You'll see, we'll all benefit from this. I excused myself shortly after, driving home to my apartment in a daze. $500,000. My grandmother's entire legacy, gone. She'd worked her whole life building a successful restaurant chain, saving everything for my future. Don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness, Olivia, she'd always said. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. That night, I pulled out the documents my grandmother had left me. Frank might have found a way to access the trust. But he'd forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't just the beneficiary. I was also the executor of her estate. The next morning, I made 3 calls. The first was to my grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Sullivan. The second was to my bank. The third was to an old college friend who now worked for the IRS. The money was transferred last week, Mr. Sullivan confirmed. Frank presented paperwork showing your authorization. Did you not sign those documents? I never signed anything, I replied, my suspicion growing. Could you send me copies? When the documents arrived, I studied them carefully. The signature looked convincing. Frank had obviously practiced, but it wasn't mine. I forwarded everything to my friend at the IRS, along with some interesting discrepancies I'd noticed in Jake's hastily prepared business plan. For the next 2 weeks, I played along. I attended family dinners, listened to Jake's grandiose plans for his revolutionary tech startup, and watched Frank boast about his business acumen. My mother kept giving me worried looks, probably waiting for me to explode, but I remained calm. Then the call came. Ms. Mitchell. The IRS agent's voice was professional. We've reviewed the documents you provided. We'd like to schedule an audit of your stepfather's finances and his son's business venture. There are some concerning irregularities. I scheduled the audit for Monday morning when I knew Frank would be meeting with potential investors for Jake's business. Then I waited. The weekend before the audit, Frank hosted a family barbecue to celebrate Jake's entrepreneurial success. The backyard was filled with relatives, all buzzing about Jake's brilliant business idea, some sort of app that he couldn't quite explain clearly. Olivia, Frank called out, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Tell everyone how supportive you've been of your brother's venture. Such a generous sister, giving up her inheritance for family. I smiled, taking a sip of my wine. Actually, Frank, I have an announcement about that. The yard grew quiet as I stepped away from his embrace. There's going to be an audit tomorrow morning. The IRS is very interested in how you access my trust fund. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? The forged signatures, the suspicious transfers, the questionable business plan, I listed calmly. They want to see everything. Jake dropped his beer. Dad, what's she talking about? You said she agreed to this. My mother stepped forward, her face pale. Frank, please tell me you didn't. The backyard erupted into chaos. But I just stood there, watching it all unfold. Sometimes the quietest person in the room really is the most dangerous, and this was just the beginning. The morning of the audit, I arrived at Frank's office early. Through the glass doors, I could see him frantically shuffling papers, his usually perfectly styled hair disheveled. Jake sat in the corner, looking like he might throw up. "Good morning," I said, walking in with two IRS agents. "Hope you're ready for this." "This is ridiculous," Frank sputtered, his confidence from yesterday's barbecue completely gone. "You're destroying this family over a misunderstanding." Agent Thompson, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Carter, we're here to discuss the unauthorized access of a trust fund and potential fraud. I wouldn't call that a misunderstanding." For the next 3 hours, I watched as Frank's carefully constructed scheme unraveled. The agents discovered not only had he forged my signature on the trust documents, but he'd also been running a series of questionable investments through Jake's new company. "Can you explain these transfers?" Agent Thompson asked, pointing to a series of transactions. Nearly $200,000 moved through 7 different accounts in 2 days. Jake looked at Frank desperately. "Dad, you said this was all legal." My stepfather's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "I was protecting my son's future. Olivia doesn't need that money. She's always been self-sufficient. Jake needs this chance." "By committing fraud?" I finally spoke up. "By stealing money that Grandma worked her entire life to save for me." The truth was, I discovered more than just the forged signatures. During my quiet investigation over the past 2 weeks, I'd found evidence that Frank had been planning this for months. He'd set up shell companies, created fake business proposals, and even hired people to pose as potential investors. My mother burst into the office, her eyes wild. "Frank, what have you done?" "The bank just called. They're freezing our accounts." "Mrs. Carter," Agent Thompson interjected, "I suggest you sit down. We have some questions about your involvement as well." Mom collapsed into a chair, looking at me with tears in her eyes. "Olivia, I swear I didn't know. He told me you had agreed to help Jake." "Like you didn't know about the other times he took advantage of me?" I asked quietly. "The college fund he borrowed from? The car he sold because Jake needed the money more?" Frank stood up suddenly, pointing at me accusingly. "You ungrateful little. I've been more of a father to you than your real dad ever was. Everything I did was for this family." "No," I corrected him, maintaining my calm. "Everything you did was for Jake. You just saw me as a convenient resource to exploit." Agent Wilson, the second IRS agent, cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, we've seen enough. Based on our initial findings, we're looking at serious charges here. The FBI will want to investigate the wire fraud aspects." Jake started crying, something I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. "Dad, you promised this was legitimate. I didn't want to steal from Olivia." I almost felt sorry for him. "Almost. Your father didn't just steal my inheritance," I explained, pulling out additional documents. "He's been running a Ponzi scheme through your startup. Those investors you've been meeting, they're about to lose everything too." Frank lunged for the papers, but Agent Thompson was faster. "Mr. Carter, sit down. Any further aggressive behavior will result in immediate arrest." My mother was sobbing now, decades of willful ignorance crashing down around her. "How will we survive this? Our reputation, our savings." "You should have thought about that before letting him steal from your daughter," Agent Thompson said coldly. As the agents continued their questioning, I stepped out of the office. Through the glass, I could see Frank's perfect world crumbling. Jake had moved to the furthest corner, refusing to look at his father. My mother sat there, shoulders shaking with sobs. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Sullivan. "Just received confirmation. The trust fund transfer has been reversed. All money returned to your account with interest. Want to proceed with criminal charges." I looked back through the glass. Frank was now slumped in his chair, his empire of lies collapsing around him. He caught my eye, and for the first time, I saw fear there. He finally realized that his quiet, accommodating stepdaughter had been several steps ahead of him all along. "Yes," I texted back. "Proceed with everything." Sometimes justice is best served quietly. The fallout from the audit was swift and devastating. Frank was arrested 2 days later, charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Jake, though not directly charged, watched his dreams of entrepreneurship evaporate along with his father's reputation. My mother moved in with her sister, finally filing for divorce after discovering Frank had mortgaged their house without her knowledge to fund his schemes. She called me daily, alternating between apologies and pleas to drop the charges. "He's still family, Olivia. She begged one evening. Can't we just handle this privately? Like how you handled it when he stole my college fund? I replied calmly. Or when he sold my car? No, Mom, this ends now. The local news picked up the story. Prominent businessman arrested in $1 million fraud scheme. Frank's face was plastered across newspapers, his carefully maintained image of successful businessman and family man shattered. 3 months after the audit, I sat in the courthouse, watching Frank plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. He looked older, defeated, his designer suits replaced by off-the-rack clothing that hung loosely on his frame. Your Honor, he addressed the judge, I only wanted to help my son succeed. I never meant to hurt anyone. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Carter, you systematically defrauded your stepdaughter, multiple investors, and your own family. This wasn't about helping your son. This was about control and greed. The sentence came down, 5 years in federal prison, full restitution to all victims, and a lifetime ban from holding any financial positions. As they led him away, he turned to look at me one last time. I'm sorry, he mouthed, but I just turned away. 7 years of manipulation and theft couldn't be erased with a courtroom apology. Jake approached me after the sentencing. He looked different, humbled, perhaps even matured by the experience. I really didn't know what he was doing, he said quietly. I was just so excited about finally making him proud. I should have questioned why he had access to your money. I studied my stepbrother, remembering the arrogant young man who'd boasted about his business genius just months ago. What will you do now? Community college, he replied, shuffling his feet. Got a part-time job, too. Thought maybe I should learn how business actually works before trying to run one. I nodded, appreciating his honesty. That's a good start. My mother took longer to come around. The divorce proceedings revealed the full extent of Frank's deceptions, hidden debts, fraudulent investments, years of financial manipulation. She'd lost everything except her teaching pension. I failed you, she admitted over coffee one morning, 6 months after Frank's sentencing. I was so afraid of being alone after your father died that I let Frank take advantage of both of us. Can you ever forgive me? I reached across the table and took her hand. I forgive you, Mom, but things need to change. No more looking the other way when something feels wrong. She squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. I'm learning to stand up for myself, just like you did. A year after the audit, I used part of my recovered inheritance to open a small consulting firm specializing in fraud prevention. My grandmother would have appreciated the irony. Her money was now helping others protect themselves from people like Frank. Mr. Sullivan stopped by my office on the anniversary of the audit. Your grandmother would be proud, he said, looking around at what I'd built. She always said you had a quiet strength about you. I smiled, thinking of the framed quote on my wall. My grandmother's last words to me. Don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness, Olivia. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. Frank still writes sometimes, letters from prison full of justifications and half apologies. I don't respond. Jake is slowly rebuilding his life, taking business classes and working his way up honestly. My mother has found her voice, volunteering at a women's shelter and helping others recognize financial abuse. As for me, I'm doing exactly what my grandmother hoped I would, succeeding on my own terms, helping others, and proving that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just quietly standing your ground and letting justice take its course. The quiet ones, after all, are often the ones you should watch out for the most.